Mark again the loss of the Emmanuel 9 lives tragically taken by the active evil of white supremacy and the passive evil of negligent gun laws. Our hearts are heavy. As we see the lives this week of lawmakers assaulted by the idolaters of Christian nationalism, our spirits sink. What have we learned, Lord? We wonder aloud, are we a stiff-necked people too blind to see our own sin? Too proud to confess? Too stubborn to repent? Lord, break our hearts for what breaks yours. Convict us. But Lord, as we also mark the coming of Juneteenth, may we not miss the markers of hope that you provide. On that day in 1865, we were given evidence that while evil never goes quietly into the abyss, in the end, it does not prevail. We still trust that peace is your will, Lord, that liberation is your desire. So, Lord, even as we meet here today, may we not be motivated by ideology or party, but rather by the desire to love our neighbor, by faith that all people are wonderfully made in the image of God. May we never forget the precedent you set for us, that through Jesus Christ and the cross, you endured terrible violence by people to forever end violence among people. May that guide us. And I pray these things in the name of our Lord, and all God's people said, amen.
And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, Crystal Spain.
Good evening, everybody. As Jay said, I'm the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, and thank you all for being here. Tonight is about listening, showing up, and making sure every South Carolinian knows the Democrats are fighting for them. Who are we to join the community on the 10th anniversary of the horrific shooting of Mother Emanuel AME Church? Tonight, we gather in this town hall to discuss the Charleston loophole, the same loophole that allowed a gunman to get a gun 10 years ago. You should have received a note card. Hold your note card up if you got it. And while this panel is going on, if you have a question, please jot that down and somebody will come. When you jot it down, just raise it up and somebody will come and get it and they'll get it to me and we'll get your question asked. Now it's my honor to introduce some of our incredible leaders. And we're excited tonight to kick things off by introducing someone who's been a fierce advocate for justice and equity in our state. Please join me in welcoming the chair of the the chair of the Charleston Democratic Party, Pastor Thomas Dixon. This elevator.
Y'all ain't enthusiastic? Or was my mic turned down? What's up? Let me try that again, all right? Good evening, Democrats. All right, that's a lot better. That's a lot better. I'm Pastor Thomas Dixon. I'm the chair of the Charleston County Democrats. And I'd like to welcome you all to this wonderful occasion. A little bit about me, not only do I serve as chair of the Charleston County Dems, with a promotion I think coming in place somewhere along the line, according to our beloved chairwoman, but I also serve on the Board of Trustees for Brady United, one of the original gun violence prevention, the oldest gun violence prevention organization in the United States. But it's not about the organization, it's about the safety of human beings. It's about the fact that a person who should not have had their hands on a gun was able to get a gun 10 years ago that led to 9 lives being lost that night and 5 more traumatized for the rest of their lives. And a community that's still left healing. So as we come together this evening, being blessed with our 2 state senators, Senators Dion Tedder and Senator Ed Sutton, and their vision for the community to host this town hall, and then to have the privilege of being graced by Senator Mark Kelly and his beloved bride, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. I don't even know how to say how blessed we are right here in Charleston County tonight. So with that said, as the chair of the Charleston County Democrats, I just want to say to one and all, welcome, welcome, and let's have a wonderful Democratic value evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dixon. Now it's my honor to introduce someone who leads with heart, courage, and purpose. Our very own State Senator, Margie Bright Matthews, who represents State Senate District 45, which includes parts of Charleston County, and the 2023 recipient for the prestigious John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award.
Good afternoon. Before we begin, I think we would be remiss if we did not give a moment of silence for Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband in their tragic passing, as well as Senator John Hoffman and his wife for the injuries they endured at the hands of someone who doesn't need to be mentioned. If we can please honor them with a moment of silence. Amen. I have often said, when is enough enough? When is enough enough? But most of you who don't realize it, it was 10 years ago today when all of our lives changed in South Carolina. Some of us have acknowledged it, some have not. It was on that day that I dropped my daughter off at volleyball practice as a volleyball mom. It was on that day that I saw DePayne Middleton, doctor, also dropping off her daughter, headed to church. It was on that day that I drove through an eerily quiet Charleston on my way back to Walterboro, only to see sirens and cars going towards town. It was on that day that I got calls from friends in common with Senator Clemente Pinckney and myself. And I kept calling. Please tell me, because I knew where he was that evening. It was on that evening around 11 when I learned that, yes, he was a casualty. I closed down for several days. I couldn't believe such a horrific act had occurred in one of our beloved churches. Sometime in the aftermath, somehow I decided to run. Someone got me to run, or some omniscient being got me to run. I'm a mom with 4 daughters, and I was totally committed to raising them and carrying on my practice. I did not expect to be a senator, but I ran. And somehow God has ordered my path, and here I am. We're here to pay homage and give respect to the 9 for the town hall, but also to pay respect to the 9 folks that lost their lives, but also to respect that those people, those other victims that were in the church are also victims, and they'll carry that for the rest of their life. As a matter of fact, the church is a victim. Let me get to what I'm supposed to say, just remarks. I continue to fight to close the Charleston loophole. I promise you, I will continue to do that. I will continue to fight for a hate crimes bill in South Carolina. I can't tell you that I'm from Walterboro. I can't tell you it's always going to be pretty, but it's going to be a fight. It is going to be a fight, even if I have to call hatred and evil out for what it is. I was just talking with Congresswoman Gifford, and she just said, fight, fight, fight. She doesn't know. I intend to continue fighting. For all the 5 counties that I represent in the Low Country, we deserve a hate crimes bill in South Carolina. We deserve some control over these guns. And I just suggested to all of my colleagues in the caucus that we deserve a bill which will protect our private information from crazy fanatics like in Minnesota. I intend to fight for that. I intend to fight for Charleston. It's often said I only represent Johns Island and James Island and Ravenel and Wadmalaw and Charleston. I consider myself a Charleston senator. And I'm going to continue to fight for you and what the state of South Carolina needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Matthews. Now I'm honored to welcome a powerhouse group of leaders to the stage. Oh, this works now? Oh, sorry. A powerhouse group of leaders to the stage who are fighting every day for safer communities and a better nation. Please join me in welcoming, all the way from Arizona, United States Senator Mark Kelly. I need everything. And please continue to stand to your feet to welcome a former Arizona Congresswoman, Gabby Giffords. Our very own South Carolina State Senator, Dion Tedder. And our State Senator, Ed Sutton, also a Citadel graduate, Ed Sutton, Senator Sutton. Thank y'all so much. And I would be remiss if I didn't introduce some of our leadership that is present today. We've got our newly elected first vice chair, representative and assistant minority leader, Roger Kirby. Our second vice chair, Myra Rivera Vasquez of Beaufort. And our newly elected third vice chair, Ralph Prelo of Berkeley. All right, y'all, let's get this show moving because I want to respect folks' times, and I know that the senator and the congresswoman have a hard. Yeah, and anytime you want to write a question, just flag it in the air. I know this feels very formal, but you know, we're trying to keep it on time. All right, so we have some very pointed questions that we've created from some previously submitted questions. So I want to get through those first. So the first question goes to Congresswoman Giffords and Senator Kelly. Our federal gun laws have some gaps, including what's called the Charleston loophole. You've both supported legislation time and time again to close that loophole. Can you talk to us about this issue? Why is it so important that we fix it, and what other gaps in our federal gun laws need to be solved?
Well, thank you, Crystal. Gabby and I have been working on this issue of gun violence, not since she was injured. Gabby was shot in 2011, nearly assassinated by a gunman who showed up at a Safeway grocery store when she was meeting with her constituents. And I knew a little bit about the issue. Gabby certainly did as a member of Congress, but it was the shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School that kind of propelled us in this direction to try to get our country to move in a better place on this issue. an issue that makes us stand out in the worst of ways. We have levels of gun violence in this country that no other developed nation has to deal with, especially for children. And we've, traveled the country for this issue. I'm now in the United States Senate, working on this, along with a host of other problems that we're dealing with right now. And we had the opportunity to come down here to Charleston, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I want to just, on behalf of me and Gabby, express my condolences about what happened a decade ago at the Mother Emanuel Church, something that should not happen in any sanctuary of any religion anywhere in our country, ever. So, we just want to say how, sorry we are that that happened and happened to this community. And it just doesn't affect the members of the church, it affects everyone. That our laws here are such that there are loopholes in our gun laws that you can drive a truck through. And, in this case, they had to do with the system where somebody can acquire a firearm. And, Gabby talks about this a lot, like the one thing we can do to improve our gun laws is with the
Background check.
background check system. And in this case, in Charleston, a decade ago, the shooter in this case went to buy a firearm. And the required for the 3 days under the current law had passed. And under federal law, if 3 business days expire, the person's allowed to buy a gun, even if the background check hasn't come back to the seller of the firearm. Now, in this case, with this individual, if there were more days available, they would have found out that, well, in fact, he should not be buying a gun. So this is one of these giant holes, giant loophole in the system that you can, figuratively drive a truck through. That this man was able to get a gun when, if the system was designed better, that would not have happened. And it can be fixed. And your Congressman, Jim Clyburn, has legislation to extend the 3 days to 10 days. There are waivers, there are ways to, if you wind up in that situation and you really don't feel like you should be denied, there's a waiver process. But generally, you would be allowed 10 days to finish the background check. And that's the amount of time that the FBI would typically be able to sort out any issues. Now, our organization, the organization that Gabby and I started, Giffords, has worked on this in a number of different states. I think about 20 states. But if this doesn't get fixed, we wind up in more situations like the one you saw here in Charleston, where then later, weeks later, Gabby has to show up and give people just more more folks die. So we're trying to address this. Beyond that, there's other ways to strengthen the background check system with regards to domestic violence, domestic abusers.
All right, Gabby, it's been 10 years since the shooting at Mother Emanuel. However, it seems like these tragedies happen again and again. Do you ever want to give up on your work and just end gun violence?
No way, Jose. Move ahead, do not look back. I hope others are inspired to keep moving forward no matter what.
All right, the second part of that question, Gabby. June 25th marks the 3-year anniversary of the Bipartisan Safe Communities Act. Although it was a big accomplishment, everyone in the room is painfully aware that we still need to close the Charleston loophole. Are you optimistic about further meaningful progress on the issue?
I'm optimistic. It will be a long, hard haul, but I'm optimistic, I'm optimistic, I'm optimistic.
All right, Senator Sutton, as a veteran, you have experience working with being around weapons of war. Why is it so important for you that we take measures to get these dangerous firearms off our streets and out of our schools?
So before getting into the meat of the question, I do want to say a special thank you to our three neighborhood partners, being Hampton Park, Wagner Terrace, and North Central, for being flexible with our town hall tonight. And also the Citadel staff, we gave them a call on Friday asking if they had a video available for us, and they turned it around quick. So can we get a round of applause for the Citadel? Their staff members are here working overtime when it's summer break, so very, very much appreciated. I don't shy away from the gun conversation on the campaign trail and up on and in the legislature, because like Senator Kelly, I'm a veteran. I've been serving and still serving. Been serving 19 years, and we'll be able to retire June of next year. And I talk about guns in the frame of my military service, because when you show up to the military, they just don't hand you something and say, go on, you got it, get out of here. And that's what our state does right now. But in the military, you get a background check. Everybody comes in, gets checked out. You get security screening. You get intensive training on how to handle that weapon safely, how to secure that weapon. And then you ever leave it unsecured or misuse it at all, it gets taken away from you. You lose that right, you lose that privilege. And nobody, absolutely nobody can accuse the military of being anti-Second Amendment. So I'm not sure why our state cannot follow the military method of how we approach firearms. And the absolute bare minimum is just universal background checks, something that 80% of the state, Republicans, Democrats support. But the folks up there in the legislature, unfortunately, are beholden to the NRA and are just, quite frankly, afraid to do the right thing.
Thank you. Congresswoman Giffords and Senator Kelly, when we talk about preventing gun violence, so much of the conversation focuses on what's happening in Congress. But there are also local programs doing critical work every day to interrupt cycles of violence. How do you think we can better support these community-based efforts, and what is at stake if we don't?
CBI and community.
Well, what Gabby's referring to is, she said CVI, which is Community Violence Intervention. And just before coming over here, we were at the Medical University of South Carolina, which is your level 1 trauma center and a teaching hospital. And they have a program that they were able to set up due to funding from a lot of different sources, including from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that we passed last Congress when President Biden was in the White House, but it was Democrats and Republicans working together to try to address some of these issues. Now we've got a lot more work to do at the federal level. But we got an opportunity to tour the hospital. We started out in their trauma center. And this was really, really interesting, I thought, because I've known about these community violence intervention programs from Gabby's work at Giffords and even before I was in the Senate, but never got like the details from somebody that lives this and works this every day. And they talked about just some examples of patients that come in the door. They've got gunshot wounds. And as soon as they can stabilize the patient, if the patient's conscious, they start interviewing the patient almost immediately to find out, do they feel safe? Sometimes they might not feel safe because they think the person that shot them is going to walk through the door of the hospital and shoot them again. And what are the things in their homes and in their community that's putting them at risk? And then what are the things you can do to help this person get out of this situation? And they gave an example of a young man that was shot recently, and the CVI specialist, the person in the hospital that works on community violence intervention, is helping him study for the AVSBAD. The AVSBAD is the test you take to get into the military. So this is a young guy who was shot, finds himself in this situation, you know, he probably never expected himself to be in. And he's got all these things going on in his life that set him down, likely down a path that put him in this situation. You know, sometimes that might be the case. There's other times when people just happen to be innocent bystanders, right? That could be injured. But they're going to help this guy. And they do the same thing. They help people get jobs. They help them get a driver's license. They help them graduate from high school. They help them get out of the situation that they're in that has put them at risk. They find out, is there, you know, if you're a young person, a teenager, are there guns in your home? Do you hear gunshot wounds or gunshots when you're laying in bed at night? So this program is designed to intervene. And get this, this is what really kind of surprised me today. And we heard this from the woman who runs the organization, Dr. Ashley, and I can't remember her last name right now. Dr. Ashley, who said, I think it was her that said this. I asked, when you have somebody that comes through the door of the trauma center who's been shot, what's the likelihood that they've been here before from another gunshot wound? And that number is as high as 40%, that they get repeat customers, 40%. But at their hospital, because of this program, the number's 3%. Now, with this budget we're dealing with from the White House and what's going on with, you know, the president and his former co-president, a lot of these funds are being put at risk. And there are hospitals, not this one here, not the Medical University of South Carolina, but others that the doctor had talked about that have already had their funding cut. And they have to shut down these programs. But these programs work, and they work well. So that's why at Giffords, we support these community violence intervention programs that Gabby mentioned.
Awesome, thank you. Senator Tedder, I didn't forget about you. Senator Tedder, you've been a strong advocate for funding necessary violence intervention programs and giving support to survivors of gun violence and their families. Can you talk about why it is so important that we take a community-focused approach in reducing cycles of violence?
Yeah, so thought I was off the hook there. But I mean, just what the senator stated, the community violence intervention programs are very important. And as you see, based on that number, and here's why, because these are the people that are in the community. A lot of our nonprofit organizations that do this work, and speaking of the budget, this year, as you all know, the state of South Carolina did not do any what we call special projects or earmarks. And a lot of that money goes to these violence intervention programs. So this year, none of those organizations received funding, federal or state. And so again, the work that they're doing, and it's important because again, they're in these communities, they're on the ground, boots on the ground. They know the youth, they're working with them. They know that family trauma, those repeat customers who have been victims of gun violence before. And these organizations are people that, quite frankly, those who we want to help, they trust. They can identify with them. And so it's important that we continue to fund those programs, and they work. I volunteer with a lot of them. We have my communities, Keeper, Positive Vibes, Ronjanae Smith, Everyone Voice Matters. It's so many different organizations that are here on the ground that are doing the work, but without that funding, and quite frankly, these people volunteer their time with whatever resources they have. They're going into our schools, they're having programs for our young kids, and really educating them on, on the safetiness of weapons and violence, but why to stay away from those things, and not to be afraid to report when someone brings a gun to school, et cetera. And so I'm always an advocate for that. We'll continue to fight for those programs. In fact, under the Biden administration, Vice President Harris had the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And I was able to go up there with a couple of colleagues, group of state legislators from across the country that she invited up for a convening to really inform us on the resources that the White House had for us. Unfortunately, South Carolina didn't accept all of those resources, but the fact that they created that program and it was working, there were so many states utilizing the federal resources and the manpower that they had. And my understanding is that program has been stripped away, unfortunately, but they were doing good things, just educational. We talked about common sense gun legislation. In fact, I have a bill pending in the state Senate to close the Charleston loophole, and mine does exactly what Congressman Clyburn said. It extends it to 10 days And while we have not had that debate yet, it has not had a hearing in committee. We were able to debate it last year because I put it up as an amendment on the floor when we were passing constitutional carry. And so we debated the issue. Of course, they ruled it out of order because that has no relation to constitutional carry. But we were able to debate and ask the questions why some people are against something that simple. Just wait 10 days, to make sure that we get it right. But I will continue my efforts in the state Senate to push those programs, to push for more funding, and also legislation that helps around the area.
Thank you so much. Congresswoman Giffords and Senator Kelly, we know there's a lot happening in Washington, D.C. when it comes to gun safety. Like Republicans making it easier for everyone to get a gun silencer, no background checks needed. What should we know about what's happening in our nation's capital, and why is it important for us to stay engaged in this moment?
Well, we've got this big piece of legislation that we're going to start debating in the Senate. It's already passed the House. It's what the president calls the big ugly bill. Well, actually, he doesn't call it that. That's what I call it, because it's got a lot of problems. I mean, Gabby, what do you think about that bill?
Sucks.
Oh. Didn't think you were going to say that. It's got some major issues. It's a bill designed to give a big tax cut for billionaires on the backs of people that can't afford health insurance and food. It's going to permanently cut the taxes of if you're in the top 0.1%, it's like a $350,000 tax cut. If you're somewhere in the middle, it's hundreds of dollars. If you're on the lower end of income in our country, your expenses are going to go up because you're likely, in some cases, you might lose your health insurance through Medicaid, or you might lose SNAP benefits. So costs are going to go up for people at the bottom. People at the top get a big giant tax cut. They've also snuck a lot of other provisions in there, getting rid of clean energy tax credits that are helping us transition to renewable, like solar, wind, hydroelectric. Those tax credits will go away in favor of pushing oil and gas projects in a time when, it's clear that, climate's changing and the planet's warming, and we've got more days. And like a couple of years ago, we had over 30 days in a row where it was over 115 degrees in Phoenix. 115, that's hot, really hot. So also in this legislation is a provision snuck in there in the middle of the night on silencers and short-barreled rifles. So under federal law, under the National Firearms Act, which was passed in the 1930s, to buy a silencer or a machine gun, a fully automatic weapon, you had to go through an extensive background check. You had to pay a fee. It's like $200. You had to get fingerprinted and photographed. And there's a database of who owns these things. And because of that, because of the extensive background check and the fingerprinting and the photos and all that, the whole package, very rare that a silencer, or people in the gun industry like to say suppressors, it's the same thing, silencer or suppressor, is used to commit a crime. It's pretty rare. But imagine a world where you don't have to go through the extensive background check. And by the way, if you're somebody who now owns a silencer, like if I owned one, I could just sell it to any of you with no background check. Silencers will proliferate through society over time. And what that means to, like when Gabby was shot in 2011 at the Safeway grocery store, maybe somebody doesn't hear the initial gunshots and can't remove themselves from the situation. Or maybe at the school, nobody hears it, so the police are called later. In cities, I assume Charleston probably has this, but in most major cities, there's a system called ShotSpotter, where the sound of the gunshot wound or of the gunshot immediately notifies the police to where it happened, like almost instantaneously. So that system is less likely to work, or it's not going to work as well. So this is, put in there kind of in the middle of the night. Also taking short barreled rifles. So where you can conceal a rifle more easily because longer than a barrel on a pistol, but shorter than, a full rifle. Think of a gun about that size. That is, as a senator would know, it's much more accurate, more deadly, bigger round, round like you would, maybe fire out of an AR-15, but a much shorter gun, easier to conceal. That's in there too, to make those easier to be purchased. So it's a bad bill all around. We're trying to get these things removed from it. Big question is, which of my Republican colleagues in the Senate will ultimately stand up to the president on a number of these items?
That's a great question. Let us know when you have the answer. We're right behind you. Senator Kelly, you represent a purple state with a strong tradition of gun ownership, yet you've consistently supported gun safety measures. Why is this an issue that needs to rise above partisanship?
Well, it does need to rise above partisanship, but I'm sometimes like puzzled. Why do we even have to have these discussions? Because it shouldn't be a partisan issue. The senator mentioned that I think you said universal background checks is supported by 80% of people in South Carolina. Across the country, it's over 90%. If you add up all the states. Well, the only thing that polls better than universal background checks, there are two things: ice cream and free money. Now, I don't know who these people are that don't like free money. I know some people, like my chief of staff, who's in the back, doesn't really like ice cream. But yeah, 90% of people approve of something. Why does this have to be a partisan issue? So in a purple state like, Arizona, we still struggle at the state level with our legislature to get common sense solutions to gun violence, passed. I think it's harder in Arizona than it is federally, or maybe about the same. Not much easier than here in South Carolina, but it shouldn't be like that. But I think if people talk about this issue over and over again, and it becomes, for at least some people, becomes the number one thing they care about, politicians on both sides of the aisle, especially on the Republican side, will start to listen. And especially if people vote on the issue. You could, if you really start thinking about it and look, well, where is this candidate on this specific issue? And make that part of your consideration as to whether or not you're going to vote for the person, that can have a significant impact. Hey, Gabby and I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and she has already been through her first school lockdown. Not the drill, like the real thing. Now, she was about 2 at the time. I don't think she's going to remember. But if she was 4 or 5 or 6, those kids, they remember, even if nobody is shot. The trauma from that experience impacts them. And our kids are having to grow up in this horrible situation about going to school and worried about whether they're going to get shot or not. And the same thing for the parents. So please keep thinking about this and know where your candidates that you're going to vote for stand on this issue.
Senator Tedder, we know that the legislature here is controlled by a majority who are often who are often averse to wanting to do anything about gun safety in today's divided climate. How can we still make change in our community outside of legislative pathways in this state on issues like gun violence prevention?
Good question. And for those that don't know, the Senate, as of this last election, switched to a super majority, having us in the super minority. I believe we're 1 Senate seat away. So if we pick up 1 seat, we can go back to just the majority and not super majority, which we can do. And so that's a call to action for in 4 years, 3 years. But to that point, it's 46 state senators, 12 Democrats, 124 House members, 38 38 picked up 2 seats, 38 Democrats. And so just by simple math, we're outnumbered. And so to your point, yes, a lot of our bills, and quite frankly, we have, if you look at it, a lot of our members have bills sitting in committees, very good bills, common sense bills, bipartisan bills, but unfortunately, we don't control the docket, now I'm thinking I'm in court. We don't control the agenda and what happens and the priority of the bills. But to that is where we need help from you all in advocating and calling and emailing and coming up, traveling to the state capitol to advocate on behalf of common sense gun legislation. And I'm just curious because when you're sharing, the senators sharing key points of the big ugly bill that quite frankly, a lot of us probably didn't know those things snuck in there. How many people in the audience before this session were familiar with the fact that there's only 3 days with the Charleston loophole, there's only 3 days to get a background check and then they can sell the weapon? How many people knew that? Okay, a lot. So that's shocking. Well, that's good.
Engaged crowd.
Well, and because we've been having these conversations over and over. But to that point, knowing that information is important because then it just amazes me if you talk to anybody running for office, if you just have a normal conversation to ask them, why is 10 days unreasonable? I would love to hear their answer because I don't think they could give you one. And so what do we do? How do we do it non-legislatively? I think we just keep fighting, as the Congresswoman said, and we keep fighting by we mobilize, we get people out to vote, but also just the advocacy part coming up to the Capitol. I'm telling you, there are certain things where, for example, when the House Republicans introduced this horrible tax bill that they thought they were going to pass, and it would in the state, and it was going to give the top 1% a huge tax cut and tax the lower income families. So because of the public outrage, they went back and redid the bill. And so your voices do matter. And so, but it's when you work collectively, when everybody's like, this is not a good idea. And so having your voices heard, coming up to Columbia and sitting down and telling the senators and representatives, this is not okay. This is what we need. I think that we need more of that because again, we're in the minority and we need all the help that we can get. Believe me, we're fighting, we're doing all we can. I can tell you, Senator Bright Matthews, she's not afraid to fight and she takes them to battle every day. But again, with that, just advocating, I mean, some of these folks, they just don't care, quite frankly. You can have the most cordial conversation, the most reasonable conversation, and at the end of the day, they don't care. And the only way we really change that is through the electoral process and getting better candidates, but getting people out and voting. And I know we talk about that all the time. It's almost like beating a dead horse, but it's true. It really is, man. In fact, the majority leader reminds us often, if y'all want to stop complaining and get something passed, you need to win some elections. That's what he tells us. Now, that is true. However, it'd be a lot easier if they didn't gerrymander everything and draw their own seats. So again, we need your help, but we will continue to fight and really, it'd be good to have y'all come up and just be advocates for this common sense legislation. Thank you.
Senator Tedder. Yes, you guys can leave Charleston.
Yeah.
Come to Columbia. I know
You'll
it's
get a
less
bus.
fun,
We'll
but
do a bus.
you're welcome. Congresswoman Giffords and Senator Kelly, you've both been strong voices of action on gun violence, especially when it comes to the impact of young people. What motivates you when you think about the kind of future we want to create for the next generation?
Kids, 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 and Sage.
Oh, our granddaughter's name is Sage.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back 20 years, maybe even a decade, the #1 killer of children wasn't this, it was car accidents, especially because of the numbers with teenagers. And because of steps that the government, state governments, and the federal government took. Auto safety, highway safety, laws about, DUI and enforcement. We were able to bring that number down. Well, at the same time, you know what happened? The death rate from gun violence of kids went up. Accident, murder, suicide, access to firearms increased. The number of firearms in the country is in excess of the number of people right now, over 350 million. I think the number is north of that now. So that number's been going up. So the number one killer for children is gun violence. And it's almost hard to imagine when we're over at the hospital today, one of the CVI coordinators were talking about a German family that moved to the United States, and they were at the beach and the mom was shot. They've since moved back to Germany. She survived. And certainly that case isn't an example of a kid, but still somebody that they had a relationship with who was, from somewhere else and wound up going back, that felt that they couldn't live here anymore, just because it was too risky. And the risk to a child in our country is significantly higher than the risk in any other developed country. And it's not because of them. It's not the kids' fault. It's our fault, collectively as a nation. It's the fault of Congress. It's the fault of the South Carolina legislature that we can't get our shit together in a way to do something that clearly makes this society safer for kids. And we got to keep fighting. Can't give up.
Congresswoman Giffords, ending gun violence is so important to so many people here today, here with us today. What's your advice to people looking around their own communities and wondering what they can do to help?
Be a leader, be an example, be passionate, be courageous, be your best.
Thank you.
Senator Sutton, you want to answer a question?
Got it. I'm still here.
In addition to your service to our country overseas and your work here in South Carolina, you have another important job as the dad of 2 young sons. Can you talk about why it's so vital that we build a safer future for the next generation and what steps it will take to get us there?
Absolutely. And my boys are 3 and 5. They're at home right now watching the new Minecraft movie because they had both had good days at camp. So Dad said, "Yep, you can watch the new movie, and hopefully I'll get home in time for bedtime." But Columbine happened my freshman year in high school, right? And certainly being younger at the time and being naive, thought the grown-ups would do something about this. They'll fix this problem, but it won't get worse. And unfortunately, it's gotten worse. It's gotten a lot worse. In the mid-2000s, you had the assault weapons ban expire. And then I really feel for from there, especially we mentioned at the state level, now the constitutional carry where anybody can carry. You can carry anywhere in the state, by the way, anywhere in the state, open, no training, except the State House. Can't carry on the State House grounds for some reason, but everybody else, it's acceptable. But so I kind of got tired. That's why I'm here. I'm in my first term in the Senate. I got tired for the adults to do the right thing. And what Senator Tedder mentioned is our numbers are low. Now I'm an Afghan vet. I'm used to being surrounded, so I'm comfortable with that. So we have to be creative of how we fight, right? And I don't think we're going to get there necessarily in our state with gun bills. We're going to get there with ethics bills, and we're going to get there with gerrymandered independent council bills, right? And one of the worst things that happens is again, these NRA and all these other splinter groups that spend money. Last year when I was running for Senate and Dion was in the Senate, we both spoke up about when the constitutional carry was being debated, and they turned the bots on us, right? All of a sudden, I get very low interaction on Twitter. My post had 25,000 shares. Some of those shares were my home address and phone number. And oh, by the way, here's pictures of his family as well. That's how nasty these groups fight, right? And we've got to cut the money off. I think that's the way that we get after them and break their influences by cutting the money off. Going back to my boys, the simple line is what we have is not acceptable. And I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to rest, not going to stop working until we get back to a safer society, where a society where 2-year-olds don't have to worry about their schools being locked down to a shooter. Thank you.
All right, so let's take some questions from the audience before the senator and the congresswoman have to leave. So there's a question from a young person in the crowd. If you want to stand up, I don't know who submitted it, but I guess I should tell you, put your name on here too, sorry. He asked this question, and anybody can take a stab at it. Are the gun laws going to affect hunters?
No. Not, I mean, generally people don't hunt with AR-15. And, common sense legislation that all of us support is about getting guns off the streets and getting them out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. Domestic abusers, people who are dangerously mentally ill, convicted felons. Felons aren't allowed to own firearms. You know what that means. But not hunters. I'm a hunter. I don't have a lot of opportunity anymore, but that's not the intent. We all respect the traditions we have in this country, and hundreds of thousands of Americans enjoy hunting or target shooting or want guns for their own protection. I get that. Gabby's a gun owner. I'm a gun owner. We understand those things, but there are common sense things that can be done to keep us all safer.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? Dion, you're a hunter. Sutton, you're a hunter.
You got it.
Oh, no, okay. Okay, South Carolina is a deeply red state. Do you, Senators Dion or Tedder, have thoughts about how we could change that?
Yeah. Well, by the way, redistricting comes up in 2030. But to that point, we have to start now. When we talk about the census, we do a bad job at informing people, young people. I honestly didn't know how important the census was in undergrad. But when I got to the General Assembly, like, oh, at least this is what they say they use to draw the lines. But I mean, yes, I think I'm an optimist. I think we have an opportunity to gain some seats back, those that we've lost over the last 6 or 7 years. But quite frankly, I mean, yeah, the only way to change that is getting out, mobilizing. I mean, we just saw thousands of people across the country this weekend.
Millions.
Yeah, give yourselves a hand. And so that is inspiring, and I try not to read comments on social media because it's hard. I have to make myself not reply to these people. But so many, it was like, oh, well, what did they accomplish? They didn't accomplish anything. They're just out there, no kings. And I'm like, you know what? One, we'll see you next year in 26, and we'll see you again in 28. But to that point, it accomplished a lot because people are informing themselves, people are educating themselves, and really getting involved. And that's what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to get involved. God forbid you start understanding the things that are sneaking in these bills and understanding how the legislative process works. That's why we have all of these distractions, on social media, whether or not Elon is doing something, I don't know. But we have to get more involved, and it's going to take us really boots on the ground. We have to engage in our neighborhoods. And quite frankly, a lot of people, there's a distrust between legislators and Congress people and just the general public. People don't trust the process because, quite frankly, the middle class and lower class have been left behind for a long time. And every time that you go out and vote and you don't see anything that benefits you, people lose hope and they say, well, what is this doing for me? But I promise you, I know some people that are fighting for you, maybe in the minority, but over time, we will continue to gain traction. And we're inspiring younger people to run for office, people who are ethical. The senator mentioned ethics. And quite frankly, one thing that people asked me when I ran for office, I'm a first-generation college student. Nobody in my family ever ran for office or anything. And so people were like, well, what you thought? And I say, well, not really. Because as a kid, I always believed, which is what inspired me as an intern on Capitol Hill to do this work, is that the people that are elected, I mean, people put these people in office, these are the brightest, most intelligent people. And when I got to the South Carolina legislature, it was a complete opposite. So,
Senator Sutton, you wanna? Senator Sutton, you wanna take a stab at that question?
Sure, and this is as it relates to the South Carolina, and again, military pilot, I'm always blunt and straight with my comments. I think we also have to do some internal soul searching as a party as well. Quite frankly, we have a relatability problem with our state, and I think it's gotten worse in the post-COVID era, that we've been assigned our algorithms and we kind of just stay in our safe lane, if you will. We've got to stop using terms like privilege, right? A guy who worked on a construction site doesn't want to be told he's privileged by someone who's never been on a construction site. We lose that voter, right? You cannot offend somebody and then expect them to come to your side. So I keep going back to Clinton 92, right? Drinking beer with folks, playing the saxophone. We got to do that first before we have the political conversations with folks. And also, if people don't understand our issues, we can't be judgmental. We can't talk to them like college professors, right? We got to get back to using everyday language and being relatable with folks. So part of that, what Dion and I, and thank you, Mike Hobbs, who's around here, is we're going to start traveling the state. We're going to go to places like Edgefield, places like Pickett's, right? They probably haven't talked to a Democrat in 20 years, other than what they've seen on the news, and let them know, hey, we're your neighbors, man. We're not some three-headed monster from Brooklyn or anything like that. Like, I'm also an alligator hunter. You know, there's a lot of alligator hunters in South Carolina, and kind of lead with that relatability issue before we get on to talk about other things. So again, looking in the mirror a little bit and figuring out what we need to do from a messaging perspective to get back to being relatable with our state.
All right, we got a few more minutes before we lose some of our panelists. In the current environment, in the current environment of lack of bipartisanship from the GOP in DC, how do we accomplish meaningful policy change on gun control? Are there any GOP congressmen willing to cross the aisle?
Yes.
No.
Gabby mentioned Ted Poe, who was a Texas House member who was rather conservative, but also a very good friend of hers. So those relationships matter. And building those relationships with their Republican colleagues, they can make a difference, especially at the right time. So in the last Congress, we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. So that were mostly Democrats, but some Republicans, a good number of them. Some you wouldn't typically expect to support legislation like that had anything to do with strengthening background checks. And this did. It strengthened background checks for people between the ages of 18 and 21. It also added a lot of resources into mental health care, especially in rural areas. Yeah, so we can accomplish things. It's just not as much as we would like. And to get to back to the other question, it's about registering people to vote and winning elections. Winning elections is what really, really matters in this fight. And Gabby, are you an optimist?
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, me too. I'm the guy who flew a space shuttle built by the lowest bidder. I am optimistic.
And this will be the last question. What can we do to break the stronghold that the NRA has on our legislators?
It's a good question. I mean, the obvious answer is campaign finance reform. When Elon Musk talked about spending a bunch of money against Republicans who were going to vote for Donald Trump's bill, I went to one of my Republican colleagues and I said, hey, look at this. This is a problem. You have the richest man in the world saying that he's going to, cause you to lose your next election. We should do something about this. John McCain, my predecessor, I'm in John McCain's Senate seat, had the McCain-Feingold Act. over years, that legislation was weakened by actions taken by the United States Congress. But we can do that again. We get to make the laws. We get to decide. If our constituents push us, and especially push some of my Republican colleagues on this issue, we can change campaign finance laws. And if you change them in a way that an organization like the National Rifle Association loses their influence with these members of Congress, they will be less influential. And they're not going to get their say anymore. So that's the one thing that I can think of that would have the greatest impact, but not just on this issue, on every issue across the board.
And Senator Kelly, before we wrap, what's your message to our community in this current political climate, especially as we continue to fight to keep our families safe?
The top line message is do something, get involved. You know, try to help, make a phone call, send a letter, send an email. If your senator or House member, if they hear from you, you have much greater influence over the person who will not pick up the phone. And we listen. I know when Gabby was in Congress, every Monday, she'd go to Washington, she would ask her office, what are people calling about? I do the same thing as I walk by my interns, often as I go to the floor to vote. Like, hey, what are people calling about today? That does really matter. And then showing up at rallies, helping people, registering to vote, knocking on doors, those things really add up and they make a big difference.
Thank you. And Gabby, before we close, do you have any closing words to impart on this?
Stopping gun violence takes courage. The courage to do what's right, the courage of new ideas. And seeing great courage when my life was on the line. Now is the time to come together, be responsible. Democrats, Republicans, Independents. We must never stop fighting. Fight, fight, fight. Be bold, be courageous. Nation's counting on you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ready? Thank you.
So thank you all for being a part of tonight. We're going to let Senator Kelly and Congressman Giffords head out, but we're going to keep this conversation going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Full circle, Mom.
Yep. You want me to say? Yeah. You want me to say? You want me to say? I want to. So we've got our two state senators here who want to who will continue to take questions. And they also have a legislative update because this is, they both kind of share this area. They don't share this district, but some of you live in their district. So they've got some important information they want to share with you from the State House.
Yes, I've been getting, so I heard Senator from Berkeley, we've been getting a lot of phone calls related to that. So very important, please stay engaged the next 4 years because we're working on it. So yeah, starting off, first off, we're in District 20. Thank you all for being here for our down hall. And again, Wagner Terrace, Hampton Park, and North Central for being our host tonight. And wanted to relate some of y'all some of the things we've been working on since January this year, this legislative session that just finished up 2 weeks ago. And it was certainly, I will say, a legislative session that was defined by kind of big overarching bills. The number of bills overall that we passed was lower than normal, but I tell people that is a good thing because there's a lot of bad bills out there. But the tort reform, liquor liability, energy, school vouchers took up a lot of our time. And I'll start with one that I spent a lot of time working on, was very vocal, very passionate about, and that's that liquor liability reform bill. And for folks that aren't intimately familiar with that, due to a law change in 2017, our local mom and pop, all restaurants, but it really hit the mom and pops, the VFWs, American Legions the hardest. The last 3 years, their insurance costs have just absolutely gone through the roof. And any place that's, including the Citadel here, that serves alcohol is required to have a policy, as they should. But there was certainly, the way that law was written, there was some pretty big issues with it. And to give you an example, if you had a $7,000 policy 3 years ago, that policy is now $70,000. So in tenfold exact, and a lot of bars, that's not in their profit margins. So for me, representing downtown Charleston, certainly, with being a hospitality epicenter, very important issue. Because I'll say, like, Charleston is defined by our restaurant industry. That's why people come here, many reasons, but that's one of the top reasons people come here is our unique culinary scene. And what I don't think any of us wanted to see is to lose those local spots, that mom and pop spot that we've been going to for, I'll say a generation, closed because they can't afford their insurance cost, and then being replaced by an Applebee's or some kind of other corporate blandness, right? Anywhere America, that's not what we want. So we were able to, I'll say the bill that we got out of there, my personal opinion, we need to do 10 steps. We took 5. Good movement in the right direction. We'll probably be back on it and have some more things to do potentially next session with that. But that was one of the good things that came out of this past session is our progress that we made on the liquor liability.
Yeah. So I have some notes here because we did do a lot. You just hear about the big topic things, but just some things I wanted to highlight. One that's probably very important for everybody. We passed a hands-free and distracted driving act. And so, but it's important to understand because this goes into effect September, I believe. And once September hits, I think there's going to be a period where they will just issue warnings because we had to fight for that to be in there. Because, and here's why, because we do a lot of things very fast. And quite frankly, you all have no idea what's going on sometimes. And that's because people don't do what we're doing now, bringing the information back home to let you know what's been passed so you can ask questions about it. And this is important because you all have children, grandchildren, nephews and nieces, and the younger generation are almost always on the phone while driving, guilty sometimes, but to that point, what will go in effect, you can no longer drive while you can't talk on the phone, holding your phone. It's hands-free. You can't text while driving. And so you need to utilize some type of Bluetooth device or in-car audio, which most cars have now. We did have one senator that still had a flip phone. Didn't know how to use Siri. But
who was that?
but it's important because you can be pulled over if an officer sees the phone in plain view, whether you plug in GPS coordinates or not. They can pull you over for that. They can issue you a ticket. This will be a 2-point ticket, 2 points on your license, insurance goes up. So it's important that you know this information so that you tell your children and their friends to not do this, but also be proactive. Get them some devices where they can stick the phone, on one of those little holders, or make sure that their car is equipped with some type of Bluetooth device just for safety purposes. And hopefully this will cut down on a lot of car accidents, distracted driving that we see often. I mean, all of us can drive, we can go 2 miles and we'll see probably at least 5 cars where people are on their phone. So that was one thing that we did that I thought was important to highlight. About educators, we passed the work experience credit for educators. And what this does is, so it's a way for teachers and educators to earn more. It basically says that your prior work experience, based on what field you were in, if you were in the military and you were specialized in some area, or you taught a certain course somewhere and you weren't a certified teacher, that experience can be now added as a prior work experience to then bump your pay to add that level of experience, which is important. And so that's another way that we can help our educators earn more money because they need it. I never understood why teachers are amongst the lowest paid but for every teacher that I've had, I wouldn't be here right now. And so it's always been weird to me, but that's one of the things, and you can clap.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things we worked on.
And I'll jump in on that. Another really good thing, and I know we talked a lot earlier this evening about guns. And that is an area that is a massive struggle, but there are a lot of other areas where we can find common ground with the other side and make progress. And I feel like this is probably one of the best years for education, minus the vouchers, but for everything else we did for public education in a long time. Another big win that we were able to get in there is the starting teacher pay in South Carolina will now be $48,000 across the state. And of course, yeah, big win. And then obviously in Charleston County, they pay even more with that. So also at the local level, 65 here in Charleston. So it's the old adage, you get what you pay for, right? You know, teaching is a passion for a lot of folks, but people have to be compensated appropriately to stay in that job long term. The other big thing with the Education Assistance Act, and sorry if I'm still in thunder, it was in there, is now teachers, when they're hired, they will know. It was actually a little bit of a shock to me that how statewide, how terrible Charleston County does a little bit better, but other places, the state bar was so low that teachers didn't know what subject they were teaching when they were hired. They didn't know what their salary was going to be. So now there's going to be time requirements when you sign that contract. That you'll be informed. And the other thing is if you do a transfer during the school year as a teacher, you're also not automatically, your license isn't automatically put on hold or suspended with that. So we fixed some issues there. So two other big wins in education.
And yes, that's right. Yeah. Teacher work. Yeah. That is a part where you don't actually have to do. Yeah. Well, you deserve a break. We, along the educational, because it's important for you to know too, we passed the private security services in public schools. So we've been talking about gun safety, gun violence. A lot of people concerned about their children in schools. And really we struggle with law enforcement. They're trying to recruit law enforcement agencies. Their numbers are sort of low. They're trying to recruit. And so it's difficult when it comes to safety or school resource officers being in every school. And sometimes we need more than one in the school, depending on how large it is. So what we were able to do, because there was some law or regulation where only SLED it had to be South Carolina law enforcement agency. Now we've been authorized where SLED they can contract with a private security company. Obviously, thorough background check from SLED. They would have to go through all the training. SLED has to approve of this agency. But what this allows is for our school districts across the state to contract with private security companies that can help beef up security, so to speak, but in a safe way, not in the way where the schools look like prisons, but just whether that's not unmarked car, but a plainclothes officer or security officer that may be authorized to move around the school just to keep their eye on things. And that was a step forward to trying to keep our kids safer. So we were able to pass that as well. And so that, again, somebody asked about bipartisan things. We do a lot of bipartisan things sometimes. It's just usually, for whatever reason, a lot of our bills get stuck in committee process. But just wanted to update you on that as well. That's one thing that we passed and we're able to do that I think it's important for you all to know.
Absolutely. I'll do one more topic and then you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
Perfect. So towards the end of this session, you may have read about this in the paper. Obviously, Charleston's a port city. I mentioned earlier, hospitality city. The port also has a major impact here. And the way the port board is appointed is the governor does. There's 9 seats. He does all 9 appointments, which again, didn't know that. I do now. I think it's problematic, and we'll work on that a little bit. But the board that he put forward, and I sit on the Senate Transportation, so this comes through my committee, had 5 members, so over half from Columbia, right? Last time I checked, there's no inland terminal, there's no sea terminal in Columbia, and 0 from Charleston, 0 from Charleston, right? And every county in this state benefits from the port economically. But we also get the negatives here in Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester. We get the traffic. That's probably the #1 biggest negative, and then pollution as well. So that's problematic because the person sitting in Columbia, they ain't thinking about traffic here on 26 in Charleston. So another good example was I filed a bill very last day of session, made a big stink about this on the Senate floor. filed a bill. Over half of the Senate, including the Republican leadership, co-signed it with me that we're going to mandate that going forward, we'll have membership from Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester County, and that'll start getting. So it's important for us to find kind of those issues that kind of cut across the board. So with that being said, if you
Well, I
got
one more thing, yeah.
more.
Probably up there, everybody's waiting on hate crimes. So where are we with the hate crimes legislation in South Carolina? I will tell you, in the House, I know that Representative Gilliard is still pushing his bill, trying to get that heard. The Clemente Pinckney hate crimes legislation, I don't believe they passed that yet, or had a committee meeting on it. In the Senate, we're doing the same. Actually, Senator Bright Matthews and I, we co-sponsored a hate crimes bill in the Senate, a companion bill, and we were able, fortunately, towards the end of session, we did get it out of full committee. So our hate crimes bill is on the calendar, which means that it is ripe for debate. We were able to get bipartisan votes on that in Senate Judiciary. It was debated heavily, so you got to kind of see where people were. But we had some Republicans that before didn't vote for it that came along with us this time, and that gives me some hope. But again, the way the Senate rules are, there is one person that has an enormous amount of power that is nobody should really have, regardless of which side you're on. And so it's on the calendar, and that's where we need you all's help with advocating and pushing for it. And I'll just say the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Massey, I've tried to talk to him, hey, I'm not doing hate crimes, period. That's his response. But we are continuing to push it, and I think it sends a message that some of his colleagues even voted with us because you had to have the majority votes to get it out. We got it out of subcommittee and full committee. So it's on the floor, it's on the calendar. It is objected to right now, meaning there are 2 senators who have their names on it. And so it can't come up unless someone makes a motion, and the only person, the way the Senate works, that gets recognized is the majority leader. And so usually when that period opens up, he's the first that is recognized, and he immediately moves to dispense with the motion, period. And once that's done, we can't do it just based on our rules. The other way is to have him set it for special order, which they do when we block their bills because it's a bad bill, and they say, well, we're going to do it anyway, so he can move to set it for special order. He won't do that for hate crimes, but what we're trying to do is get enough of our Republican colleagues to at least appeal to him and say, look, and all I asked him, I said, look, if just let us have the debate. Let us have the debate. Let us have a robust debate. I'd love to hear why you're against it. You may make some valid points. We may make some valid points too, but at least let us have the debate, because now, and then if you vote how you want to vote, but we can't even get to that step, which tells me that either if it gets debated, we probably have the votes to pass it, which I really believe we do. And so the only way to stop it is to not allow the debate. Because of, if you look at the makeup of the judiciary and the Republicans that came over to vote with us on our bill, that speaks volumes, but we're still fighting that fight. And so we just ask you, stay engaged, don't give up, and we'll continue to fight. Like I said, we have that bill. There's one in the House that they're still pushing. I'm pretty sure we go back in January, the House can probably get a hearing on that, and we can see where they both end up. But we have another year left before the end of this legislative session. Essentially, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Well, the Senate is going to shut the lights off at 7,
Oh,
so
questions?
let's get some questions here. We got
You
microphones.
can just
at
come up
front
to the
of,
microphone.
aisle here.
Okay. Good question. So
I'm a co-sponsor. I'll take that one if you don't
Okay,
mind.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so I'm
yeah,
a co-sponsor of that bill with Senator Davis,
Davis.
from down in. And that's
It
where
is.
I come at it from, that frame too, as a veteran. And why I agreed to sign on the co-sponsor it is my generation has been overprescribed opioids, which leads to some pretty serious addiction. So done all the research, cannabis is a way safer alternative to go for chronic pain. So that we should see that hopefully start moving in January. I think it's passed the Senate already 3 times. I don't predict issues necessarily in the Senate. It's already passed there 3 or 4 times. It's always the House. And that's mostly because the Speaker of the House is not on board with it yet. So that's where the holdup's been in the past. That is Merle Smith out of Sumter. Neighborhood president down here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's great to see everybody this evening. I'm curious, and I commend you on your work on the security in schools. I just got wind of recently there was a bill about grants for religious institutions to help with security. I know when my daughter goes, it's round the clock cops, and that makes, bills go higher. Is that something you are aware of or interested in?
Oh, I'm sorry, Deanna, you keep taking them.
You said a bill
Of
for.
grants to reimburse security at religious organizations.
The Pray Safe Act. So I'm a co-sponsor of that one too. That is, I'm a busybody, y'all. I'd like to get involved in a lot of different topics, but Senator Grooms and I from Berkeley County, so another good example of a bipartisan effort. And really what helped me get on board is talking with Brandon Fish at the Jewish Federation here locally. We had a good long sit down and mentioned that as a priority. And hey, we get it. We're in Charleston, especially this day, that is something that needed. So I'm fully on board, and we'll be pushing hard on that one next year.
Thank you.
Takes the next question.
In downtown Charleston, we've had a long tradition of a relatively vital civic dialogue with freedom of speech. But in the past 2 years, we've confronted ridiculous restrictions. Last weekend, there were 2 rallies in Charleston. Neither was allowed to have a PA system. There was a man standing on a bucket yelling at a crowd because the city wouldn't allow the people to have a PA system. And then the police chief congratulates himself on how free the speech is in Charleston. We're not allowed to have tents and tables at our demonstrations so that we can sign people up and be organized and give people a place in the shade if they're hot and need some water. Is there anything? I'm currently filed a lawsuit against the city over this in federal court. And we have a coffee discussion at City Lights Coffee at 10:15 on Thursday morning if you want to help me make that work. But is there anything the state legislature can do to restore freedom of speech, particularly in your districts, to the city of Charleston? We had 3,000 people in Somerville, and there was less than half that in Charleston. Somerville is now freer than the city of Charleston. I never thought I'd see that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I've gotten messages from constituents from this past weekend with feeling that speech has been restricted to the point that you make all of these city ordinances that are coming about on the number of people that can gather, what time you can gather, whether you can gather on the sidewalk. I mean, obviously, it's strategically, I believe, and this is my personal opinion, some of those ordinances have gone too far. And so what I will say to you is, because that is a local issue, what can we do is the question. What we can do is what we haven't really done is talk to our city council about the issue, say, and talk to them about, hey, this is something that maybe we need to change. Let's look at rolling back some of these restrictions or finding a more equitable way to do it. And I have planned myself to have a conversation with the mayor and the police chief about this really after this weekend, just about certain things and allowing for certain demonstrations, because like I said, I think that those ordinances have gone too far. Those are city ordinances that our town councils and city councils pass. And so that is more of a local issue, which we really try to stay away and let the locals handle local and separate. But there are times where, we just saw this with the library board. There are times where certain legislators jump in on certain issues, but I'm happy to have that conversation with city council members and the mayor to see what can be done, if anything, but also just let them know how I personally feel about some of those ordinances. So thank you for that question.
Let's, the old folks have been talking a lot tonight. Let's go with the young member down here.
Will me and my friends still get free lunch at school?
Yeah, it's a good question. That would be good. So the background and the direct answer to that, Senator Tedder and I would be fighting for that all day long. Last year, Governor McMaster, so there's a federal program and right pro-life state, but I'll get there in a second. that provides free meals for kids during the summertime, so no kid goes hungry. You would think that would be a pro-life value, right? Last year, Governor Master said, nope, we're not going to take that money anymore. It's federal money. It's tax dollars that you and I have sent up to the government, or the federal government, that are sending back to us. And he said, no, I don't want to feed the kids anymore. So as long as Ted or I were fighting,
Yeah.
you would add more with that, because I think you
Yeah,
were part
we-
of that last
Yep,
year.
and to answer your question, yes, you will, because we're gonna keep fighting so that you can get free lunch. And you and your friends, because you deserve it, and quite frankly, it should be that way. And to that point, last year, a number of us, and this may have been before you got elected, my freshman year in the Senate, I went up with a couple House members, actually. I was the only senator to go, but we met with, I mean, we were really trying to find something to do when the governor said he was not going to accept those federal funds. We went up and met with the White House, the Department of Agriculture. I mean, we were trying every avenue and seeing if the federal government could get involved, and somehow we could usurp what happened with the governor. And so that is an issue, but know and tell your friends that there are people fighting for you in the State House, and we will make sure that you continue to have free lunch.
Great question. Great question.
So what can y'all do, and this is another issue of a failure of local governments, but what can y'all do at the state level with terms of housing affordability? I represent a lot of active duty military. They've got to drive an hour to come down to the base. And so also when you have to do drive till you qualify, that also creates strain on roads that makes us spend more money and creates more pollution. What are things y'all can do at the state level for housing affordability and more infill development?
So, and I'll jump into that, because my freshman year in the House, I took on the housing legislation and was able to get it debated, but it failed ultimately with the vote. But I'll say this: we have to have a real conversation. I mean, it's unaffordable for many people, not just middle class and lower. It's unaffordable for people with professional degrees, young people coming out of college that are medical school, what have you. You just can't afford to live in Charleston, North Charleston. Some of it, it's just all not affordable. We have to have a real conversation on how we regulate certain things. I know people don't like to use the word regulate, but to that point, when we can equal the playing field, with developers coming in and paying their fair share, quite frankly, that's not a popular idea. I will get pushback for that all the time. But I truly believe that we have to do that. I mean, there are things the state can do. We do it for these big companies that come in all the time. We offer all these incentives, these tax cuts, and they come in and they build their facilities and they create jobs. But maybe we can take it a step further. Why don't we require and say, hey, well, we're already giving you all these tax cuts. Why don't we, if we do this, if you build workforce housing around your facility so that the people that you're bringing the jobs for can actually live nearby. So innovative ideas like that, workforce housing. We're working on some things. We just passed the Military TIF Act here that will help with the Air Force Base. And I know that I've met with the Housing Authority and trying to figure out how we can partner some public-private partnerships for what's, and affordable housing, that word is, let's just say attainable now, because it's really not affordable for anybody. But to that point, we have to get innovative and try to incentivize, quite frankly, the same thing we do with companies and corporations that come in to build manufacturing facilities, incentivize them to invest in that. A portion of this has to go to a community that's nearby. You need to revitalize this community or put money to build houses for people that work there. And that just makes sense for business, right? So I think if we can shift there, that's one of those creative, innovative ideas, and hopefully we can start having those conversations going forward.
Two pylons, I know we're getting short on time, and Billy knows exactly what I'm about to say next. Low Country Rapid Transit and build the missing middle. And if you don't know what those are, I can give you an entire TED talk on that. Just follow me on Facebook. I'm ranting about it all the time, but those are two biggest things that we can do to help housing here.
And real quick, we'll get you.
Yes, I'd like to know the status of domestic violence legislation. I believe that South Carolina is still in the top 10 of men killing women. Aren't we? Yeah.
So there are pieces of legislation pending to that. In fact, Senator Tamika Devine out of Richland County, she has several bills that have been on the calendar dealing with that have been stalled right now. And I do, in my last conversation with her, I believe when we go back, she had to talk to some colleagues on the other side and work out some things. But I do believe we will take those up when we go back in January. To that point, we have, it's a real issue. And we have organizations out here, just going back to the funding issue, you know, that really help in that area. So what my goal and hope is too, outside of legislation, is getting the funding back. Because last year, like my sister's house, they have shelters for victims of domestic violence. Last year, I was able to get them like $300,000 in the budget. This year, nothing. And federal cut their budget. And so we're not even legislatively, our community partners who are doing the work, they're losing funding and resources. And so we really have to get back on that, supporting those types of efforts as well. But there are pending pieces of legislation that I'm hopeful we will get to this session.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that because I'm a mental health therapist. And some of the stories I hear, I can't believe what happens to some of these women. I really can't. It's terrible.
Thank you for that work.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's do, we got two more. All right, two more, and then we'll call it a night here.
Gentlemen, I'm a science teacher at a high school up in North Charleston. Palmetto Scholars Academy, we're a state charter school. We are very passionate about what we do, and we get paid only 70% of what everybody else gets paid. Recently, also with our school, at least a third of our students their parents are affiliated with the military. Recently, funding was pulled for virtual charter schools in the state. What do you see happening for the brick and mortar charter schools in the state?
I do know we've got a big charter school accountability bill coming up next year. I think I've heard that's going to be a priority. But and again, going back to where I said military pilot, I'm always frank. I haven't got a chance to actually dive deep into that issue yet and study it. So I'll pass you my information afterwards. I'd like to sit down and talk a little bit more. So when that comes around, we're ready for it.
Please consider visiting these schools just to get an idea.
And we're more than happy to do that. Certainly. And two, like Ed and I, we don't have all the answers, and we don't pretend to. And this is why these events are important, because maybe I should know you make 70%, and I'm not sure. But those are the conversations that we only know that information when we get it from you, and now we can go back and advocate for you. So thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Last question.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for answering public questions. I know this means a lot to me to hear that my senators and my people actually care and are actually willing to talk to public about it. My question to you, you mentioned how South Carolina is a pro-life state. Is there anything being done in current legislation to protect your constituents' right to choose?
Yeah, great question. And also, thank you for being engaged as a young person. We absolutely need more of that because it's your future on the line that we're dealing with. And I also say, if you couldn't detect the sarcasm earlier when I said pro-life, because so many things that these folks on the other side do are anything but, like, taking meals away from hungry kids or flooding our community with guns without any kind of training. But so one of the things that Senator Tedder and I are prepared, and the fight didn't come this year, it may come next year, is they're going to try to pass a total abortion ban at some point. And we're going to have to shut the place down because the numbers, again, we're in the super minority, not in a good spot. So if you watch towards the end of the session this year, we pulled out every legislative trick rule that we could to stop the Republicans from passing a convention of the state bill, right? Another thing, they love the Constitution, but they want to go back and rewrite the Constitution. So that's something that has been filed, has thankfully not moved yet in committee. By the way, we have one of the sister senators here that was a big part of the last fight. So should that bill get movement, we'll be following Senator Matthews' lead with that.
So, yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, what we're doing is when maybe not specific pieces of legislation to that, but when there is an attack on choice, we always find a way to combat it. And really that's what we do. We try to stop it, you know, and fight it with all three of us and help with our colleagues in the House too. So we will continue to do that and be sure about that because they will come back with another abortion ban and we'll fight until the end.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So, well,
Bring us home.
yep. All right. So, well, thank you all again for coming. Yeah, thank you. We'll be around maybe for like a couple of minutes if you have individual questions. But
Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you. Check this.